Welcome back. In topic 5, we're going to look at electronic and mobile commerce as well as various other enterprise systems that we typically find in organizations. The following aspects will be covered. First of all, we're going to start off by talking about various forms of e-commerce, which include business to business, business to consumer, consumer to consumer, as well as ecommerce, and we also find e-government commerce type systems. Then we're going to proceed to look at advantages that we can associate with the use of e and m commerce. So what are the advantages that companies typically would experience? What are some of the technology infrastructure that we need to have in place? We're going to look at enterprise systems, we're going to look at transaction processing systems, and then we're going to end off this whole discussion by referring to various other business type systems. Now, these aren't always important as it depends on company or organizational resources. Now, let's start our discussion by looking at an introduction of e-commerce. Now, e-commerce can be defined as any business activities. Now, business activities can be those activities that relate to the supply chain, for example, distribution, buying, selling, marketing, and services that we want to electronically conduct over networks. Now, the networks can be in the form of the internet. We talked about extranets as well as various other corporate networks. So to summarize, e-commerce is any business activity that should take place over networks. Now let's proceed and talk about types of e-commerce. Now, as mentioned, we do get 4 main categories. We get business to consumer, business to me, we're going to talk about that shortly as well, business to business, consumer to consumer, and then e-government type services. Now let's start off with the second one, business to business. Business to business can be defined as a subset of e-commerce where all the participants are organizations. Now, in the first topic that we discussed, we talked about the introduction of information systems in organizations, and in one of the sections we talked about the supply chain and the value chain. So what do companies need to do in order to ensure that they add value to their products and services? Now, in most cases, a company cannot function on its own, and there's various other companies and factors that should be looked at. For example, we can look at our suppliers, we can look at our partners, we can look at our employees, our customers. So there's a huge amount of people that actually interact with a business. So business to business relates to all the other businesses that will need to conduct transactions with, let's say, your particular company. We do find that business to business communication is expanding rapidly. Many companies nowadays realize that it is just quicker to use networks and networking infrastructure in order to have business transactions, to send information from one company to another, to request products, etc. So we do find that many companies nowadays are linking their systems to their suppliers and partners. If we go to the first one, business to consumer, we will see that it's a form of e-commerce in which your customers deal directly with the organization. So we're eliminating the need for intermediaries. So what does this mean? In the older days, you had your traditional brick and mortar shops. So if you wanted to buy anything, let's say for argument's sake, CDs, you would have go into town, go to a shop, go to the mall, and then you would have looked through the products in that shop, and then you would have selected your CDs. Okay. CDs in that case would have been bought from music producers, companies selling the CDs, and then the company would actually act as an intermediary that will sell the CD to you. So we're eliminating all those intermediaries. So technically it's now possible to go and directly from the producers, the developers, designers, you can actually now go and buy your products. Now, there has been a tremendous growth in e-commerce And the reason for that is many people have realized that by buying your goods online, it is actually cheaper and you can actually shop around to find the best deals just by sitting in front of your computer. There's an additional benefit in that it allows you to go and personalize your products. So you can now, by going through a website, you can say, I want to buy, let's say, 20 t-shirts. I've got my own design. You upload your design. You can select your color schemes, make whatever changes you want to make, and you submit your request to that company directly. So again, it gives you more capabilities or opportunities to go and customize your particular products. The third one, through the growth of social media networks, companies have realized that they can promote their products and indirectly they can link people from the social media site to their electronic commerce sites. If you think about social media platforms such as Facebook, nowadays we are bombarded with various advertisements. So for example, you might see ads about cell phone companies releasing new cell phones, people liking it, your friends liking certain products, and that's actually a marketing tactic that they use to try to get you involved. So by selling directly to you as a customer, the producers or the companies selling the original products, they are actually eliminating the intermediaries, which will result in higher profits for them and then lower costs coming down to the customers. Now let's look at a quick example of business to consumer. In South Africa, probably one of the best examples would be takealot.com. Now takealot.com, we don't have physical shops, so you go to a website, you browse through the catalog, you select the products that you want to buy, and then they will deliver the products to you. Now there's a subset to business to consumer e-commerce, and that subset is known as business to me. Now when we talk about business to me, that is when the company treats each and every customer as a separate market segment. So they can actually go, they can detect what your buying patterns are, they can customize the website based on your preferences and previous sales, and then they can actually go and personalize marketing and direct that to you. What we also find many times is that if you go to a website and you buy a certain product, you might find that they give you something like the following. Customers who bought this item also bought the following item. Now again, it's a marketing strategy, so you might think, okay, if other people want it, I perhaps might also need to have it. And it actually brings you, it links you to that particular product. For example, if you buy a particular CD from a certain artist, they can go and tell you, okay, this artist has also released the following CDs. Aren't you perhaps interested in buying one of those CDs? So business to me is a more personalized environment, and again, companies have realized that you can't just treat everybody as the same. We need to go and work on a personal level with our clients. The next e-commerce type is consumer to consumer. Now this is also a relatively new one that's gaining a lot of popularity, and it involves electronic transactions that will be conducted between different consumers, and these consumers will typically make use of a third-party website. So if you think about websites, it can include anything from Craigslist, Bid or Buy, Gumtree, OLX, etc. So we've got people that want to buy their products to other people. So you will have customer one. Customer one will go and advertise their products on a website, for example OLX. Customer two will see the product there, they want to buy the product, and OLX will act as the facilitator for this particular transaction. And by doing that, the product can be exchanged and money can also be exchanged. Now let's look at some major differences between these types of e-commerce. Now we're going to look at a few factors such as the value of a sale, the length of the sale process, number of decision makers involved, uniformity of the offers, complexity of the process, and then the motivation for the sale. So if we look at business to business, we will typically find that this is where most or a lot of money is actually transmitted from between different companies. Business to consumer, there's also a huge amount of money, and then consumer to consumer, we would find it's usually your smaller type items. Okay, now guys, these are just some guidelines. We might find that in certain instances there's exceptions to these rules. Okay, if we look at the length of the sales, business to business can be anything from days to months, so it can be long term. Business to consumer, days to weeks, and then consumer to consumers are typically quite fast, where it can be hours or a few days. So how many people are involved in each of these processes? For between businesses, you would typically find various people. Business to consumer, typically one or two, and then consumer to consumer is also one or two individuals. The uniformity of what is on offer. With business to business, we would find that there's uniform products, so you've got certain services and products that you want to sell, and those will probably remain fixed. If we go to business to consumer and consumer to consumer, we see that we now get the ability to go and customize products, especially business to consumer. And then with consumer to consumer, these are typically where there's one product that you want to sell. So there's it's not a mass buying type environment. If we look at the complexity of the systems, we would find that business to business systems will be very complex, and then for both business to consumer and consumer to consumer, these systems would be typically a little easier to work with, easier to implement. Now, what will motivate people to use each one of these systems? If we look at business to business, we will see that it's usually driven by business decisions or needs. For business to consumers, it's individual customer needs, or depending on how they feel at that particular point in time. And then the same applies to consumer to consumer. The last type we're going to look at is e-government. Now, e-government is the use of ICT to simplify the sharing of information, to improve the relationship between the citizens and government. Now, in most cases, it might happen that we have old paper-based systems. We get our legacy type systems, and these are now converted and made available electronically, and then this would be advertised and delivered to the citizens of that particular country. Now, e-government commerce sites come in three formats. We get government to consumer, government to business, and then government to government. Government to consumer is typically where we find situations where citizens need to complete tax returns, renew licenses, and find general information from government. Government to business is usually where there's government projects where people need to bid on these, where companies need to get access to laws and regulations, and where they need specialized information. And then finally, government to government is where governments can actually report information to each other. For example, information about individuals, births, arrests, warrants, all those kind of things. In our next discussion, we're going to continue and talk about mobile commerce.